You can watch this entire video in one go if you wish, or you might choose to just focus on 1 to 2 slides as part of a lesson. So please feel really welcome to use this video in any way that suits you best. Now, what happens when we flip to create after reading? So we finished reading and we're really inspired to become authors ourselves. But we're going to change the format slightly to create a brand new text of our own. So flipping to create means that we've really enjoyed what we've read and now we are ready to write. So what are some of the things that we might produce? We might create a poster or a diary entry or a letter, an interview with a main character, or maybe even a newspaper article. And you can see here that there's something called an A to Z of a topic. And that's when, perhaps you've just learned about a tiger. And then you write down the alphabet A to Z and you think about facts that you've learned about the tiger going from A to Z. And it can be a really interesting thing to make an alphabet. So another fun thing to do after reading an information book is to write as if you are actually, for example, a volcano. I am a volcano. And you talk about yourself and all the things that relate to being a volcano. It can be a really nice way to change the format of the information from the way in which you originally read it. You can also make an infographic, turn your information into something that has icons and pictures. It's highly visual. Maybe you'll write an opinion paragraph about something that goes maybe even 2 or 3 paragraphs. Or perhaps you'll hold an interview with a fictional character. So really, the world is your oyster when you've been reading. You can then turn around and you can become a writer yourself. So here we've got things like letter, book review, and diary entry. These are all tasks that you can do when you've finished reading. Now, sometimes when we finish a story, we just love it so much that we want to stay in that story world. And so we write what we call fan fiction. So we're writing about the same characters and we're keeping it going. So we might write a sequel or a big flash forward to the future. We might write about the characters in a flashback to the past, or we might write a story that focuses on one of the minor characters in the novel that you've just read. But this way in which we continue the story world because we love it so much, that is called fan fiction. So here we've just got a little diagram that shows some of the ways in which you can write some fan fiction. And here's that diagram turned into a grid. So you might imagine one of your favorite characters from the story you've just read, but now you're writing a whole new story and your character has a meeting that is life-changing, or the character that you love to write about tells a lie and this leads to big trouble. So these are some ideas for fan fiction that can be very enjoyable. Here's another diagram that gives you ideas for fan fiction. And here are the same things from the diagram, but written in a grid. So, maybe one of your characters that you've enjoyed reading about has a secret now with enormous consequences. So you write a brand new story about this. Or perhaps there's some new trouble brewing up. Or perhaps 2 characters are talking through something very important. But the important thing is you're making up your own stories about some of your favorite characters, but in a new context. Now, some people really enjoy writing microfiction. So maybe you've read a novel about a particular theme, and you'd like to write about the same theme, but you're going to set yourself a challenge. You're going to write a complete story on that theme in 300 words or less, and we call this microfiction. Or perhaps you've enjoyed the novel, but you'd really like to give it an entirely different ending, and that's something else that you can do as a fan fiction writer. Now, you might have very much enjoyed a theme, but you'd like to write on the same theme, but with a different set of characters and write your own story. And so this can be a really enjoyable thing to do. Sometimes what you want to do is you want to pay homage to a text that you've read and do something different with it, but pay homage to it. That means you're actually still kind of reproducing the same story. So this animation of the Tin Forest actually does retell the story of the Tin Forest, but it brings the characters to life. So homage texts very much stay with the original story, but do something different with it, like perhaps make an animation, just do something a little bit different. But it's definitely, homage really means saying, I really, really respect the original text. Now, transmedia narratives are for people who are feeling extremely enthusiastic about building a story world, because your story world is actually going to join up by your reader reading different sections of the story across a number of platforms and formats. And so to actually get the whole idea of the story, your reader has to join up all the dots. So I've just listed here a few ideas that that you could do for a transmedia narrative. And some people actually write these as a form of fan fiction. They take a minor character from a novel and they build a kind of story world and they feature that character in a new story, but it's a transmedia narrative because you have to put together all the pieces by looking at a video, looking at a website, looking at a blog, and as you travel your way through that world, you join up the dots and you make the story. Now, Inanimate Alice is the most fantastic example of a transmedia narrative. It's running until a bit later in 2020. So because it's supported by Flash and Flash is just disappearing, the only way that people are going to be able to access it is if teachers really buy a sort of premium edition of it. But anyway, for a little bit longer and into 2020, you can actually look at this transmedia narrative online. So if you happen to be looking at this video in early to mid 2020, enjoy accessing Inanimate Alice if you've got a browser that can cope with Flash. So of course, a really enjoyable thing to do is to create a picture book of your own after you've read something. You may in fact pick up the themes in a novel and follow up those themes with an entirely different story, but in a picture book. Sometimes you can create a cartoon that will express a key theme from the novel that you've just read. And sometimes, just for a bit of fun, you can create some pebble people to kind of symbolize some of the character types that you've just met in a novel. Another really enjoyable thing is to draw a heart map of what your favorite main character loves best in the world. So that's really enjoyable as well. And a gratitude jar is also beautiful. So by the end of the book, a lot of main characters are happy because they've learned things. They're feeling grateful about their lives. So what are 5 or 10 things that your main character could write on little bits of paper and put into a gratitude jar? Sometimes when you've read a book, you feel that you'd like to make a video for a cause or run a campaign for a cause, because what you've just read about in the novel or you've just read about in the non-fiction book has got you so interested that you'd like to make a difference in the world. So, so you might make a video about breast cancer research or anti-bullying, really anything at all that interested you greatly in the fictional book or in the factual book. This is what you can make a video about or get together with some friends and campaign about. So that's really something lovely you can do after reading. And finally, sometimes when you've been reading, you're so interested in the characters that you feel like making a sort of a quest game to take the characters and play around a bit further.